To order, and pursuant to the order reference of Tuesday, April 30th, 2019, committee is studying Bill C-97, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on March 19th, 2019, and other measures. And we have the honour of the Minister of Finance, Honourable Bill Morneau, appearing before us, as well as Rob Stewart, Associate Deputy Minister, and Andrew Marshland, Assistant DM, I believe, Andrew. And I believe there's a number of other financial officials in the room. So, Mr. Minister, the floor is yours. I understand you have an opening statement, and then we'll go to questions. Welcome.
Thank you. I have an hour and a half opening statement that I thought I'd start with. Seriously, though, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to thank all the members of the committee for having me here today. It's good to be back before this committee to discuss the Budget Implementation Act. Before I speak about the measures in this bill, I'd like to thank all of the members on this committee for their due diligence on the pre-budget consultations. That obviously was critically important to us as we move forward in the preparation of our budget. And of course, I'd like to thank you now for your work on the Budget Implementation Act. Ce projet de loi constitue la prochaine.
This bill is the next stage of our plan to invest in the middle class and ensure economic growth. Clearly, investments are essential for the future. When I speak to Canadians, they remember what the situation was like for them in 2015. The Canadian economy had slowed down. People were feeling left behind. And over the following years, we worked hard to change that situation. We wanted to invest in people and communities, and these investments have borne fruit.
This economic plan have created more than 900,000 new jobs since 2015, pushing the unemployment rate to near 40-year lows. Middle-class families are better off across the country, and fewer people are living in poverty in Canada today. That's a lot of progress over 3.5 years, but we know that there's still much more work to do. People are still feeling anxious about their future and their ability to make big, long-term investments in their families. That's why our government, through this Budget Implementation Act, is taking more steps to invest in the middle class and the things that Canadians need to succeed. So I'd like to take the opportunity this afternoon to highlight some of those important measures. For many Canadians, one of their top concerns is their job. That makes sense. Canadians want to take pride in their work and be able to support themselves and their families. But as the global economy continues to evolve and as things like automation transform the job market, the skills people have today will need to change. This is a challenge that all industrialized countries are facing. But what sets Canada apart and what will help us to remain competitive in the global economy is our people and the investments that we make in them. This year's budget proposes to introduce the Canada Training Benefit, a new benefit that will help Canadians to prepare for, to plan, and to get the training that they need. An important part of the benefit included in the Budget Implementation Act is a training credit that will give working Canadians $250 every year to put toward the cost of future training, a credit that can add up to as much as $5,000 over the course of a career. That's the kind of long-term planning that you, as members, will be able to see in the course of reviewing all of our budget. Housing is another good example. We believe, our government believes, that every Canadian should have a safe and affordable place to call home. So the Budget Implementation Act would enact Canada's first National Housing Strategy Act, requiring the federal government to prioritize the needs of the most vulnerable in our society. And it would require the government to report on progress towards achieving the strategy's goals, like building 100,000 new housing units, repairing 300,000 other units, and cutting homelessness in half. The BIA also proposes measures to help Canadians take their first steps towards home ownership. It would amend the National Housing Act and allow the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation to offer shared equity mortgages to eligible home buyers. The first-time buyer incentive would reduce the monthly payments required for people in the purchase of their first home. For a new condo or house worth $400,000, the savings could be more than $225 per month. This measure is expected to help approximately 100,000 Canadians to buy their first home. The Act would also increase the home buyer's plan withdrawal limit, giving first-time home buyers greater access to their registered retirement income plan or savings plan to buy a home. These measures would be especially beneficial to young Canadians for whom home ownership seems increasingly out of reach. But housing isn't the only place where barriers exist for young people, and that's why we're also working to make education more affordable. With measures in the Budget Implementation Act, students wouldn't have to start repaying their Canada student loans for 6 months after they graduate, and interest wouldn't accumulate on those loans during that time period. That gives people time to start a career and to begin saving up. It's a change that sets young Canadians up for success, allowing them to focus on what they want to do, not on what they have to pay. We're taking a similar approach with seniors. Through Budget 2019 and through the Budget Implementation Act, we're taking steps to make retirement more financially secure. Afin d'aider les travailleurs
In order to help older workers, we are going to enhance the earnings exemption. What this means is that seniors will be able to keep a larger share of their earnings and their benefits, so that Canadians take full advantage of their pension plan. What we're proposing is that they be automatically registered. The goal is to ensure that pensioners 70 years or more will receive those pension benefits. They deserve it. However, those are not the only steps that are needed to protect Canadians and their families. Another step that we have taken is to build a cleaner, more sustainable Canada. As you know, we have already been working with the provinces and the territories to put a price on pollution and tackle climate change. We're going even further in Budget 2019 by making zero-emission vehicles more affordable, whether it be for businesses who want to renew their fleet or individuals. In the BIA, we are allowing those businesses to recover their investments faster.
Protect Canadians is by combating financial crimes. I know this committee's done a lot of work in this regard, and I know that you've looked at how we can best do that, and I'd like to thank the committee for that work. With this legislation, we know that we can help improve Canada's anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing framework, strengthening the resources, intelligence, and information sharing needed to identify and meet evolving threats, while also continuing to protect the privacy rights of Canadians and manage the regulatory burden on the private sector. Mr. Chair, I could provide more examples. After all, as you know, this is an ambitious agenda. But what I'd like to do instead, as I conclude my remarks, is to thank the members of this committee for their careful attention to this bill. It's a bill that will help prepare Canadians for good jobs, make it easier to buy a home, help young people starting out, and seniors as they retire. I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. And we should have time for about, I think, 14 rounds. We'll start with the first round, 7 minutes for 4 speakers, and then go to 5. So, Ms. Rudd, you're first on.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for coming today, and your team, I know, who has worked very hard on our budget as well. I just want to start off by saying one of the things, as you know, my riding is Northumberland Peterborough South, and I'm a 3,000 square kilometre rural riding in Eastern Ontario. And the diversity of our economy and the diversity of our population is something that I am seeing reflected in this budget. And the Canada Child Benefit, which of course was announced in a previous budget, to give some sense, it brings up just under $6 million a month into our riding. And when I go around and talk to small businesses, shopkeepers, stores, they're seeing the benefit of that money being spent in our riding. So the lift that's being received in terms of economic development, in terms of my riding, and I would say in rural communities specifically, has been significant. The other sort of demographic within my riding, I believe the last Stats Can numbers are that just over 40% of my riding is over the age of 55. So seniors and issues surrounding seniors are very important to us. And there were a couple of things in this budget that sort of responded to a number of things I was hearing. Certainly in a previous budget, when we increased the guaranteed income supplement by almost $1,000 for the most vulnerable seniors, and if I'm remembering the numbers correctly, it lifted about 100,000 seniors out of poverty and prevented about 150,000 from falling into poverty. This current budget talks about the enhancement of the earnings protection or earnings exemption, where seniors, in easy terms, seniors are able to work and retain more of the income that they have earned without losing the benefit of the GIS and those benefits and supports that go along with them. And one of the things I was surprised about when I read the budget was the automatic enrollment for those age 70 and over. And what I was surprised at were the number of people that hadn't enrolled to receive the benefits that they were entitled to. And I know we've done that in other programs, and I see that as something very positive. One of the things particularly that I don't know has received as much attention as it should is something called it's an acronym, right? The Advanced Life Deferred Annuities. And some people say, when you mention those words, people's eyes glaze over. But I heard from a lot of my seniors who are middle income that they were looking for something that would help them as they retired a few years ago, and life expectancies were shorter. They're much longer. And people are concerned that they're actually going to outlive the money that they have saved over their working years in order to retire. And this specifically talks to the ability of people to take some of their RSPs and move it into an annuity for the time past age 85. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about why that's inherent and what you see as being a benefit to retirees.
Okay. Well, thank you, first of all, for your overall comments around what we're trying to achieve, and in particular what we're trying to achieve around seniors. I never really expected that I would be able to get a question on deferred life annuities in my role as finance minister. You might remember I co-wrote a book called The Real Retirement when I was in the private sector, and I used to call it a cure for insomnia. So what I would suggest to people who had severe challenges with getting to sleep at night was just put the book right beside their bedstand, and that would help them enormously with that particular challenge. I think what I can do as well with this issue is I can take the notes on the deferred life annuity and I can put it by your bedstand, so that that'll help you out in the long term. But the fact that it's detailed and causes that challenge doesn't take away from the seriousness of the issue for so many Canadians. But it is important, as you said, to put it in context. We're trying to help people who have worked hard during the entire course of their life to have a dignified retirement. And there's multiple ways we need to work to achieve that. In this budget, there's a few things that we've done. This is one of them that we think will have an important impact on a lot of Canadians. The change in the clawback rate on the guaranteed income supplement we think is particularly important. So for seniors that are at a situation where they want to continue to work, especially in the early retirement years, we've increased the amount of money they can earn before they get a clawback on their guaranteed income supplement. So what that means is that they'll have more money in their pockets and enable them in those early years to be successful at work while they're retired or partially retired. The Canada Pension Plan automatic enrollment was important because we just thought that that was the best way to ensure people got those Canada Pension Plan benefits. But we found as we were going through that there were 40,000 Canadian seniors who were eligible for Canada Pension Plan payments. Many of them that only had small amounts of attachment to the workforce that hadn't actually applied for it. So they didn't necessarily understand that they were qualified. And so what we did was we made sure that we put funding in to actually find those 40,000 people and improve their ability to get those benefits. It'll be huge. A lot of elderly single seniors. There'll be a lot of women with relatively small amounts of workforce attachment in the generation behind. On average, I think it's about $3,000 per year that people will be getting. The deferred life annuities, another issue that we thought was important. We wanted to make sure that Canadians don't basically outlive their retirement savings. So it's a way of us thinking about how we can ensure that within the confines of our currently existing retirement system. So it's allowing us to provide more options within a defined benefit pension plan, or for those Canadians who don't have, rather, a defined benefit pension plan. And you'll know that with a DB plan, of course, people get regular payments monthly, and they know what those are going to be for the long term. And buying a deferred life annuity can give them similar sort of consistency in terms of their payments over their retirement years. So this will provide individuals with increased flexibility in managing how their savings are received in retirement, so they can take this with their new approach. We think it will enhance retirement security. For many people, it will give them a greater sense of confidence that their money is still going to be there during the course of their lives. And it's not going to run out because they budgeted in appropriately, maybe during the early years of their retirement, and were left with not enough money in later years. So an important vehicle, one that, as you say, it didn't have that much profile because it's maybe something people didn't dig into. But I think for a significant number of seniors, it will give them more comfort in their retirement.
We'll have to end it there. Mr. Polyev, 7 minutes.
When will construction begin on the Trans Mountain Pipeline?
We, I think, as you know, are currently going through an engagement process with the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion Project. That has been announced to be a process that will end on June 18th. At that stage, the decision on the project next steps will come to Cabinet, and we'll come to a conclusion on the appropriate next steps.
And when will construction begin on the Trans Mountain project?
As I said, I think what we want to make sure is we go through this process in the appropriate way, responding to the court decision on the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. So we are doing that, and as we get to a conclusion, as I said, June 18th will be the date. We'll have more information for you.
You promised the project would begin construction before last summer. Still not a single shovel in the ground. When will construction begin on the Trans Mountain project?
Happy to continue answering the same question with the same response. What we've set out to do is to follow the court direction and to ensure that we do that in a way that meaningfully engages Indigenous peoples, other people concerned with this project. We are going through that, and I believe it's a robust process that, as we've said publicly, will conclude in time for us to bring to Cabinet a decision on June 18th.
When will Cabinet announce its decision?
Well, as I just identified, we are going through a process.
On what date? Just the date. I just need the date. That's all.
Perhaps there's an acoustic problem. I'm not sure, but what we're doing is we're coming to that conclusion on June 18th. So
you'll announce on the 19th, the 20th of June?
For clarity, we're going through a process that will culminate in a Cabinet decision on June 18th, and that'll be the time period at which we'll be able to communicate to Canadians what our conclusion was.
Wow. So we will get a decision on the Trans Mountain Pipeline on June 18th. Your counterpart, Minister Sohi, has said there might not be a decision before the election, but you're confirming there will be. Yes or no?
What I'm confirming, as I've just said, is that the process that we've been going through will lead us to a cabinet discussion.
But decision. But will the decision be announced before the election? Yes or no?
I expect that on June 18th we'll be able to provide you with more information because we're going through a process.
Decision?
As I said, we're going through a process that will lead us to a.
You bought the thing a year ago. You promised that construction would begin immediately. You said the very latest it would start at summer. It hasn't started. I asked you 5 times already when the construction will begin. You can't give an answer. And now you can't even tell us when you'll publicly reveal your decision on whether it's going to go ahead ever. Can you understand why Canadians are a little worried after you put $4.5 billion of their money at stake and canceled 2 other pipelines that you might have just engaged in a monstrous boondoggle here?
Well, what we recognize is important is that we go through the review and the discussions with the interveners in this project in a way that respects their points of view. That process is going on. I'm quite encouraged because the process is going on at the pace that I expected it to. And
really? You expected it would take a year before any construction began?
Mr. Polyev,
that was what you expected?
The minister has the floor.
And that is leading, as we've publicly stated, to our ability to get to a discussion on this on June 18th.
Well, there's been lots of discussion. We know that you do nothing but discuss. We want a decision and construction. Can you give us the date that you will announce the decision and the date construction will begin? 2 dates. That's all I'm looking for.
We want to be really clear with Canadians. This is an important project.
Please do be clear.
We took this project on because we saw that there were challenges in achieving what we saw as the desired outcome, ability to get our resources to international markets, an ability that the previous government was unsuccessful at achieving. So we took on this project, and we are now responding to the court decision in the way that the court directed us to do. That is leading us to the culmination of that process on June 18th, and we will have more to say for Canadians at that time.
One last chance. When will construction begin on the Trans Mountain project?
Again, we're looking forward to the conclusion of these discussions with the interveners in the project, and that process, which is moving forward, will lead us to have a conclusion that we'll be able to discuss.
You can't build a pipeline in Canada, but you are funding the Asian Infrastructure Bank, which has as part of its mandate to build pipelines in Asia. It is a China-led bank. Given that you can't build pipelines in Canada, and given that your deficit smashes all of your promises during the election, wouldn't it be a small symbolic decision at least to cancel your wasteful investment in the Asian Infrastructure Bank?
I think one of the things that we all, as elected representatives, should always keep in mind is we want to make sure that that Canadians, that investors, both from here and from abroad, can see the opportunities here. I was delighted yesterday morning to have the opportunity to meet again with the current and now new incoming CEO of LNG Canada to talk about their significant investment in Canada.
Yeah, I'm asking with the Asian Infrastructure Bank. It has nothing to do with
Pierre,
the LNG project.
The minister has a few more seconds to answer your questions. The floor is his.
There were actually a number of things in the question, and one of them, of course, was that that we can get big projects done in Canada, and that project includes a pipeline, which is going to be important in getting LNG to markets in Asia and beyond. So that's one good example of something that can get done
Mr. Chair.
in this country.
The question was about...
He has the right to answer your question. He's answering it. And you're at a time. You've got about a quick answer, Mr. Minister.
I think I answered the question. Thank you.
Mr. Dussault.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to you, Minister, for coming to appear before us to tell us about your plan and your budget. What I'd like to say is that I feel this is sort of a last chance budget. Many promises were not kept, still have not been kept, are not being kept. And the first one being eliminating subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. That was a promise from the Liberal Party during the last election, and you have done absolutely nothing. The only thing you announced in this most recent budget is that Argentina would be reassessing, or there would be a reassessment of Argentinian fossil fuel strategies. $1.6 billion a year is given in gifts, tax gifts, to some of the most profitable companies in the country who are involved in the fossil fuel industry. That is the opposite of what you said was your priority, in other words, green energy. And to come back to what my colleague was saying, you invested $4.5 billion in a pipeline that is over 65 years old, and you want to put another more than $10 billion to expand that pipeline, to double it. How can you explain that today we're in the same position we were in 2015, $1.6 billion to the fossil fuel industry. And on top of that, we've bought a $4.5 billion pipeline from an American company based in Houston.
Merci beaucoup pour
Thank you for the question. This is an important question. As you know, we have done many things to improve our environment. We have thought about the approach we need to take to reduce carbon in our environment. Obviously, in our opinion, the most important thing to do is put a price on pollution. This will have a huge impact in the long term for our environment, and at the same time, it allows us to help companies and investors consider the kinds of important investments they can make. At the same time, we made promises on how we could transition by 2025. And what we're doing is just that. We have engaged in a process with Argentina, as you referred to. And Andrew Marsland can give you further details on what we have done to date. Yes, however, what I would like to know is when will those subsidies to the fossil fuel industry be eliminated? Yes, we have a process with Argentina, but when do you foresee keeping that promise? Well, in terms of the tax system, there were 9 explicit subsidies. And that was under a G20 arrangement or commitment. There now is only 1. Governments have streamlined
exploration expenses, the ability to pass through certain expenses, and the commitment to allow the accelerated depreciation for LNG to expire as of 2025, which is the date of the G20 commitment to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies in the medium term, which is interpreted as 2025.
Merci, je pense que ça répond à ma question.
With respect to the
Thank you. That answers my question.
substantiate the number that you quote, but we're willing to provide, of course, information to the community.
Je comprends que c'est 2025.
I understand that the commitment is for 2025. The only promise that you didn't keep, and that was a very clear one, and that you yourself referred to in the budget, were the tax share options, the stock option purchases. So you have admitted how regressive some of these measures are. You've even used very specific numbers. And for those who are listening, In 2017, 2,330 individuals earning more than $1 million a year had $1 billion in stock options. 20,000 individuals shared $2,020 million under that measure. And you said that this is a very regressive approach. So this is a promise you made in 2015, and all you've done in your budget is say that you're going to consider the issue and that there will be an announcement next summer. And yet, here we have C-97, and that was your opportunity to change the law, to change the Tax Act in order to ensure tax fairness. So why are you putting off this promise once again? It was a promise you made to Canadians, and 4 years later, you still have not kept that promise. You've even put it off once again. Well, thank you for the question. As we said, in our budget, we decided that it's necessary to take a different approach with respect to stock options. We feel that it is very important to look at how we can make sure that companies that are growing, small and medium-sized businesses, in many of those cases, are able to have stock options. Yes, but you've been saying that for 4 years. We've been asking you this question for 4 years, and you've been giving us the same answer for 4 years. That's not a solution. Yes, but this year we explained that we are going to find a solution and that we will be providing further details over the coming weeks and months in order to explain how we can keep what is important for companies that are growing, but at the same time, make sure that those who are earning considerably under that current system pay their fair share in taxes. So, as always, we have to strike a balance, and that's what we are doing. And for more details, Andrew can expand.
When everybody is having fun. So we'll turn to Mr. Sabero, and then we'll be back to Mr. Polyev for 5. Mr. Sabero.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Minister. Minister, last year, the Trump administration undertook massive corporate tax and tax reform, both on the corporate side and the personal side. And two of those measures was to reduce corporate income tax rates, and the second one was to bring in an accelerated depreciation. Our government, various groups advocated for changes in our tax rules to ensure that we remain competitive. A.T. Kearney put out a report a few months ago saying we had moved up the ranks, #2 in the world, slightly behind the United States. And I would like to hear some color on our decision-making in terms of the measures that we put in place to ensure companies in my riding in Vaughan, which you know, Martin Rea, Magna, and York Region, a number of large manufacturers can continue to invest in Canada and continue to create good middle-class jobs.
Well, thank you. I think this is a really important subject. It's obviously one that that was unexpected in the sense that the U.S. made significant changes. The U.S. tax code prior to their changes was largely one that had fallen behind other OECD countries. Canada had already moved to lower corporate tax rates prior to the United States. So we found ourselves in a situation prior to those changes, and in fact afterwards as well, where we had a very competitive corporate tax rate. So our corporate tax rate, when you add in provincial and federal taxes, roughly around 27%. For large corporations, and obviously a lot lower for small corporations, where we have the lowest small business tax rates in G7 countries. So when the U.S. changed their rates from an average of about 35% down to about 26%, they effectively changed them to be in the same zone as Canada. So it of course, made things more advantageous for companies in the United States. They broadened the base at the same time and added more things that were considered taxable. But importantly, they allowed companies to accelerate the depreciation of capital investments on a rapid basis. And that created a situation where they were more competitive than Canada was with those changes. That was what led us to, in our fall economic statement, accelerating the ability to depreciate capital cost investments for businesses in Canada. We did it slightly different than the United States did. We added more categories, or we have more categories that are able to be depreciated, meaning that our analysis that we took on concluded that the ability for the next investment in Canada by an organization would mean there'd be a 5% advantage on accelerating that depreciation in Canada versus the United States. So allowing us to be in a competitive spot for new investments that should create jobs and help our economy to grow.
No, thank you, Minister. And I would add, last night I attended the Chemical Industry Association conference, have their annual international conference here, and we've seen a number of projects, including Interpipeline's $3.5 billion project, a joint venture between Pembina and the Kuwaitis, another $4 billion project. We also have the approval of LNG Canada to the area of the country I grew up in northern British Columbia, which will create tens of thousands of jobs. And a great benefit for our economy, and which will benefit from the introduction of the accelerated investment incentive. I would like to pivot and move on to within the BIA. There is a section with regards to poverty reduction, and it's something that doesn't happen overnight. Happens with a number of policy instruments that our government has introduced. In my wonderful riding of Vaughan Woodbridge, where I have the privilege of representing those residents. Every month, the Canada Child Benefit, there's almost nearly $5 million gets sent to the residents there, benefiting over 16,000 children. The exact number is 16,210, and over 9,000 families. On February 26th, Stats Can put out the Canadian Income Survey, and it showed a large drop in poverty levels in Canada. And I think the exact number is 825,000. And I would really like to hear, in terms of policy measures that our government's continuing to adopt to reduce poverty and lift people into the middle class across Canada.
Well, this is a really important discussion. Obviously, we set out to make sure that we could not only ensure middle-class Canadians were more optimistic, but more people had the opportunity to be successful and to get into a better financial situation, and particularly those that were impoverished. So there's actually three measures that we think have made the biggest impact. One is, as you say, the Canada Child Benefit, which lifted literally hundreds of thousands of children and of course their families in many cases out of poverty. The Canada Workers Benefit, giving a benefit for people to get into work if they're not in work, and enhancing that benefit so that as they move off social assistance, they get more value from that. And the increase in the guaranteed income supplement for single seniors. Those three measures together were what add up largely to the 825,000 people moved out of poverty. And, it's one of those things that I think as we look back on what's been achieved during this first term of the Trudeau government, that we will look back and say it's really quite remarkable that in 3.5 years we've reduced the poverty level from over 12% to about 9.5%, helping hundreds of thousands of Canadians to be in a better situation today and more optimistic for tomorrow. It's particularly important when we think about the challenged demographics we have in this country, getting more people into work, getting more people with that capacity to invest in themselves and their family provides for greater future prosperity for them, but also for our whole economy, because we need people to be seeing that kind of success.
Okay. I think I have a few seconds left, Chair.
Very quick.
I would like to have in the record that now, with going back to the accelerated investment incentive, that the marginal effective tax rate on new investments in Canada is actually approximately 4 percentage points lower than it is in the United States, and amongst the lowest in the G7. So I applaud yourself and the department for undertaking that initiative, allowing firms to continue to invest in my riding, and there's a very large and heavy manufacturing presence in my riding, and I do understand their concerns and needs and meet with them regularly. I thank you for coming to the committee today.
We'll take that as a statement, not a question. Mr. Poilievre, 5 minutes.
Your department conducted a review of tax credits, and I want to know what tax increases you considered. Did your department ever discuss with you, or you with them, in person or in writing, the idea of canceling the health and dental benefits tax break that exists?
You're referring to the
health and dental benefits are not tax are are not taxable. Did you ever discuss the idea of making them taxable with any of your officials in writing or in person?
So you're referring to the employee benefit. The employee benefits is not non-taxability of employee benefits, I believe. I think you're going back to the review that we did of taxes. That was during which period was that?
2016.
Yeah, during 2016. And we did take a look at all the tax credits that were available for Canadians in order to understand the effectiveness of those tax credits, the distributional impacts of those tax credits, and the costs to the government. So although I can't remember with any specifics what the documentation that I received at that time would be, I imagine the review would have been comprehensive so that we could ensure that we considered all measures, and as is clearly demonstrated by the continuing status of that.
I asked a very short question, Chair, just a quick answer. Did you ever discuss with your officials in person or in writing the possibility of taxing health and dental benefits? Yes or no? We can move on.
I think my job as Minister of Finance is to work with the team to constantly review our tax system, and like any other part of our tax system, we would
Yes or
review
no?
that.
Yes or no?
Is it not right to say what would matter is the decisions and
No,
the budget?
thank you for your helping the minister out here. The question is, did he discuss that taxing health and dental benefits, yes or no? And I think the answer he's implying is yes, he did. But I'll move on to another one. Did he ever discuss the idea of canceling the small business tax deduction as part of that review?
To be clear, I'm not implying anything. I'm stating what.
Well, then just answer.
I'm stating what Canadians would expect a responsible government to do, and that would be to constantly review our tax code to make sure that it's working effectively. And we'll continue.
I think what Canadians would expect is a clear answer. If you have considered taxing their health and dental benefits, they would probably want to know about it. And I'm simply asking for a yes or no question. Did you discuss that idea with your officials in person, in writing? Yes or no?
Well, what we will continue to do is to be responsible in our administration of taxes, and what you can see through the conclusions of those discussions and reviews is the outcome that we've put forward, which is that those benefits that you're referring to continue to be non-taxable, and that's the most important demonstration.
The question is whether you plan to tax them in the future. And if you've considered taxing them and you've worked with your officials on taxing them, then Canadians have legitimate reason to believe you would try to do that again if given the chance. Your non-answer today should make a lot of people very nervous. You did not answer the question about whether or not you would cancel the small business tax deduction. This reminds Canadians, of course, the Prime Minister, then Liberal leader, refused to tell Canadians whether he'd cancel their children's fitness tax credit. But he did so after the election when he no longer needed people's votes but still needed their money. Next question. Did you ever discuss with your officials the possibility of raising income tax rates above the level that they have been at since 2016?
The responsibility of...
just a yes or no.
Well, it's not an appropriate answer to answer yes or no to a rhetorical question. So what I will tell you is that on an ongoing basis, we will responsibly administer our tax system.
It's not a rhetorical question to ask you if you'd considered. He'd finished his answer, and it is not a rhetorical question to ask if you have potential plans to raise people's taxes. That is a financial question. You are the finance minister. Your job is to answer these questions,
and
you have refused to do so up until now, which confirms what your plans are. If you get the chance, you will raise taxes on Canadians, just like you did last time.
And I would like to respond to say that this line of questioning is fundamentally absurd. We have been clear on what we seek to achieve in our budget in 2019, as we did in 2018, 17, and 16. All of our plans are encapsulated in our budget, and we are putting forward that budget for your consideration. and the consideration of Parliament, because we want to try to continue with the positive economic results we've seen for Canadians and for our economy.
Mr. McLeod, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Who's
And
next, guy?
thank you to the Minister for coming to answer some of our questions. And I also want to talk about tax credits. But before I do that, I want to say thank you for clearly highlighting the North in this budget. I think over the last few years, we've seen some significant investments. And this coming fall, we're going to see a number of infrastructure projects starting off. The Wattie Road will start under construction with an Indigenous government as a partner. We'll see the Mackenzie Valley Highway undergo an environmental assessment. The Bear River Bridge should be under construction. There's a number of things that are really going to really benefit us in the Northwest Territories, including the studies that are going on for a Slave Geological Province and looking at the Tolson Hydro Dam for expansion. That's something that will help us with our costs. I think for many years now, we've flagged to you that in the North, the mining industry is the backbone of our economy. And we've always been talking about ways to lower the cost of industry, the mining industry, and others to come north, because it's significantly more expensive to come to the Northwest Territories and other territories to do exploration and to do projects there. And so I was very happy to see that the mine exploration tax credit was expanded to a period of 5 years. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit how we finally got to that decision and some of the benefits of that.
Well, stepping back, we, from day one, have seen that the minings and metals industry is an important industry for Canada. Obviously, it's an industry that's, even in the time we've been in office, gone through some challenging periods and is now seeing some more success. The mining exploration tax credit in particular helps junior exploration companies with their investments. It helps them to raise the capital that they need to succeed, which we see as critically important. For projects that in many cases are quite risky. Without assurance of what the eventual outcome will be. There's many good, well-paying jobs that are created through this industry, and not least in the North, which we recognize. One of the things that I found in the course of doing this job over the last few years is that each year, had been the case in previous years, before we got into office, there was a 1-year extension of this mining exploration tax credit. And from the standpoint of those businesses that are making these investments, that leaves them with a planning horizon that's not as effective as it could be. So it was in that context that we looked at the importance of the sector, the importance of the jobs, and realized that it would be more effective tax credit if people had a longer time horizon. That was how we got to the conclusion to make it 5 years.
For us in the North, we recognize that we have an infrastructure deficit, and I think we've, as I pointed out, are doing quite well on that front. And we need investment to help a healthy economy. But we also need to deal with the Indigenous concerns. The land tenure issue is still on the table for many Indigenous governments, and self-governance or governance, period, is an issue that we need to sort out. And we've done many, many good things on that front, and I think we moved forward and had very good discussions. We need to continue that. Cost of negotiations, the negotiation process is very expensive for the Indigenous governments, but also for our government. And we've seen many cuts during the time of the Conservatives that have left us with very few negotiators on the federal side and very little in terms of resources from the Indigenous side. So I was really happy to see that we've looked at the forgiveness and reimbursement for comprehensive land claims. And I'm hoping that is going to help many of the Indigenous governments move forward. One of my communities that settled self-government took 20 years. And it was very expensive and very slow. And we need to make that a better, easier process move forward. So I wanted you just maybe talk a little bit of the importance of these measures to our government and how we can build on the progress that we've made so far.
Pretty rapidly, Mr. Minister. I want to keep people pretty close to their time frames.
Well, then I can say just a few things. First of all, this is obviously really important. If we're going to negotiate on a nation-to-nation basis with First Nations, we need to realize that in many cases the groups that we're negotiating with just do not have the resources to actually be at the table, and certainly don't have the resources to be at a table for a sustained period of time. Obviously, loans that have been around for a long time create huge challenges for First Nations groups. So that was the context, and we wanted both to deal with the historical challenge, but also enable for us to actually get to the process of those continuing negotiations in a way that made sense. And so funding those groups that are trying to get to a better place is an important step.
Thank you both. We'll turn to Mr. Polyev and then back to Mr. Fergus and then to Mr. Dussault.
Yesterday's Parliamentary Budget Officer report said, and I quote, Budget 19 provisions $3.8 billion for non-announced measures. It goes on. The negative amount indicates a source of funds which suggests either increased taxes or reductions in expenses, end quote. Where will you find that $3.8 billion?
Yeah, I think that's not the right way to characterize that. And I'd like to ask Nick if you wouldn't mind coming up and providing a more fulsome discussion.
While Nick comes to the table.
And I hope you'll keep an eye on his clock.
He even has his own name tag, so we're ready to go.
Mr. Leswick, floor is yours. Yep. And fairly concise if you can.
Yeah, you bet. Nick Leswick, Assistant Deputy Minister of Fiscal Policy at the Department of Finance. So those amounts were recorded in Budget 19. They were effectively the unwinding of provisions that were made in previous periods, so previous budgets and previous fall updates, where the government had effectively set aside money for future spending in future budgets. And so that amount of money which you cited is effectively the unwinding of those provisions in the Budget 19 period. So it was a source. It was funding the measures that were outlined in Budget 2019.
Thank you, sir.
Clarity, what I'd like to say is it's the actual opposite of what you were saying. This is us having made a provision.
What the budget officer was saying, to be clear.
That's exactly right. So it's exactly the opposite. It's the unwinding of a provision that was there. So there's no need for a source of funds. That was the source of funds.
Well, that is the opposite of the understanding of the Parliamentary Budget Officer. He so far has been much more accurate in predicting your financial decisions and their consequences than you have. Mr. Minister, I'm going to quote here from Reuters News. China restarted construction on more than 50,000 megawatts of suspended coal-fired power plants last year. End quote. Further, the article goes on to say satellite images show China has quietly resumed construction in 2018 on dozens of previously shelved plants, making it a glaring exception to the global decline of coal use. Did you get any commitments from China that it would stop building coal-fired plants when you handed over $250 million Canadian tax dollars to the China-controlled Asian Infrastructure Bank? Yes or no?
Unfortunately,
actually it was, but thank you.
The decision to get involved with international development banks is we see important for the global economy. We see it as important for, in particular, less developed countries. It helps to create export markets for Canadian goods. Obviously, it helps to improve the global economy. That's what we seek to continue to do. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank in question is an international development bank that's looking to improve the economic success of some less developed countries, what we see as particularly important in the globe.
But this is a bank that will fund projects in China. And according to the CBC, China is the second biggest military spender. with expenditure set to rise by 5%, that's to $250 billion in military spending, in the 24th consecutive increase in that country's military budget. You claim that China is a less developed country in desperate need of our help. Its economy is growing 5 times faster than Canada's. Why do you think that China and this China-controlled Asian Infrastructure Bank needs Canadian tax dollars more than Canadians do?
Well, I think that I can just repeat that we see that working with international development banks is an important part of ensuring that our global economy continues to be successful. It helps people in less developed countries around the world. It's helping Canadian exporters find markets. So these are all important issues. We'll continue to be part of those global banks together with our allies. In the case of the
OECD is estimating that China is going to spend over $8 billion on its civil and military space program, a luxury by anyone's imagination. You consider the country so poor that it needs $250 million Canadian tax dollars, Minister. Can you understand when Canadians look at you giving their money away to this China-controlled bank and see that that country is maxing out its military and space programs, that your priorities are completely out of whack?
Mr. Minister, we'll give you time to answer.
I think it would be
Those
important
questions.
for Canadians to understand that we see it as important to work with development banks. We do that alongside like-minded countries. In the case of this particular bank, which is independent of any government, we've made investments.
It's China controlled.
You're at order, Mr.
We've made
Aliyev.
investments together with Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and many, many other countries in order to work to ensure that we make a difference around the world, and that has direct benefits to Canadians. For all those producers of Canadian products that are able to find international markets because economies
Like canola producers?
Thank you both, Mr. Fergus.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, puis merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre, d'être présent encore une fois.
Thank you again, Mr. Minister, for being here before the Finance Committee. It's not the first time you've appeared before us. The first question that I'd like to direct at you is on behalf of seniors in my riding of Hull-Elmer. Since 2015, the government on several occasions has taken steps to assist our seniors. We have increased the guaranteed income supplement in 2015 for single seniors, those living alone, to the tune of about $1,000. We reached an agreement with the province of Quebec to expand the Quebec pension scheme, RRQ, so that retirees receive 50% more than they previously did when they retire. However, despite these positive changes, there are many seniors who are in dire need of assistance. Minister, could you please tell us about the additional measures taken under Budget 2019 to assist our seniors? Response. Thank you. You are right. We've taken a number of steps to help our seniors across Canada, but we know that our work is cut out for us and we have a lot more to do. It's a major challenge, and it goes without saying that for seniors, it's hard to have a dignified retirement, to enjoy a dignified retirement without enough money. So as I said, we've taken a number of steps 3 years ago. This year, in particular, we did something fairly substantial, and that is that we've ensured that the Canada Pension Plan will, in fact, automatically go or benefit each and every individual who needs that assistance under the Canada Pension Plan. Moreover, there are 40,000 Canadians who will retire and rely on the Canada Pension Plan, and that will help more older Canadians, particularly women who weren't in the workforce for a long period over the course of their working life. Secondly, the approach we've taken will ensure that those Canadians who already are enjoying their retirement will be able to continue to work without seeing a drop in their guaranteed income supplement. And this will help more retirees to have more money in their pockets, more opportunities to enjoy retirement in a dignified manner, and more opportunities for our economy in the future. Well, indeed, it will be important assistance for our seniors who contributed to building our country.
Perhaps people entering into the workforce and who are looking to buy their first home. In Hull Elmer, a lot of homes are often or have become unaffordable to a young couple or family trying to purchase their first home. This budget had contained many measures to help first-time home buyers. Could you talk a little bit more about the measures which were contained in the budget, which could help a young couple in my riding of Hull Elmer afford their first home?
I'd be pleased to. So two important measures in this budget. One that would have some applicability for some people who have savings in their registered retirement savings plan. We increased the ability for people to take money out of their RRSP to put towards a first home from $25,000 to $35,000. That will obviously not help everyone because many people won't have that amount of money in an RRSP. But for some people, it will enable them to have more money to put towards their first home. Secondly, importantly, we looked at how we could find a way to target first-time home buyers and make the possibility of a home more feasible for them. So we've come up with a first-time home buyers incentive. And this incentive is targeted, obviously, to first-time home buyers, but people who are just not quite able to get into the market. So people up to $120,000 or families up to $120,000 in annual income. They'll be able to buy a home of up to 4 times that income, so up to $480,000. And they'll be able to take part of their mortgage, either 5% for an existing home or 10% for a new home, and put that to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation in the form of what we call a shared equity mortgage, effectively reducing the amount of their monthly mortgage payments by 5 or 10%. So giving them the ability to get into a home more rapidly and doing so in a way that allows them to have more income to raise their family, which is a situation for many people. What we see is there's about 500,000 homes that are purchased each year in Canada, but 100,000 of them are first-time home buyers. So this will increase that by up to maybe 30% over in each of 3 years. So maybe up to 100,000 new families over a 3-year period that will be able to get into a first home that wouldn't have otherwise. So a significant change.
Thank you both, Mr. Dussault, and then back to Mr. Rumi.
Merci, Mr.
Thank you. It will be a quick question. I'd like to come back to the topic that we were discussing earlier on. I'm trying to understand, after 4 years, you still haven't found a solution on these stock options. You yourself have had stock options from Morneau Shepell, or have you, rather? Response, no, I have not. So you're saying no, you haven't, or you never did? No, I never had stock options. Thank you. When will we see steps being announced? You said this summer. Well, this summer is before the election. So can we realistically expect that you will keep that promise before the election? We are currently taking a look at the approach we should take.
Is to align the Canadian regime with in a similar way to the U.S. regime, which limits the amount of options that an individual can obtain.
Mais ce sera un changement législatif?
That will require legislative change, won't it? If you want to be able to implement those changes. So we can't expect that to be then before the elections. If, once we get to the summer, Parliament won't be sitting, and it won't be sitting until after the elections. We're currently taking a look at the details. And over the course of the next month, there will be more details available and to show how we can help those growing businesses, but at the same time, ensure that those who are earning considerable amounts, thanks to the position that they hold, are paying taxes in a way that is consistent with the system in the United States. What we want is to strike a balance. We want to strike a balance with those other systems in place to make sure that people aren't overly earning what they should. All right, well, you've been looking for a solution for 4 years. Anyway, I'd like to move on to another broken promise. This was a promise for pharmacare. It was a promise in 1997. You promised it again in 2015, and now you're going to put it off again to have a universal pharmacare system. Will you commit today to implement it, even though you've been talking about it for 23 years? And will you ensure that it will be a universal public pharmacare program? Can you make a commitment to those two critical components, that is universal and public? Well, we feel this is a very important issue. Our system currently isn't working. There are two problems. It's too expensive a system. We're the third most expensive. We have the third most expensive system in the world, and we need now to start taking steps to make sure that Canadians have access to medication at a fair price. We started with an agency to make sure that our prices are competitive. And then we will also use a formulary to make sure that we have a more efficient, less costly system. Question public. At the same time, we want to make sure that very costly drugs for rare diseases are also considered. And our budget takes an approach by which the federal government is able to cover those costly drugs for rare diseases.
Do so, Mr. Minister. We'll have to go to Mr. Rumi and then to Mr. Richards.
Thank you very much for having me here today and for you being here today. It's been very interesting listening to all the testimony that we've had, and the things that stand out to me is every budget since 2015 has specifically been focused on benefiting people in this country, whether it's through the Canada Child Benefits, which my community of Pitt Meadows Maple Ridge gets on average about $5.5 million per month, being applied to about 18,000 children. Or the national housing strategy, which I really like that it's over a 10-year period because it brings certainty to developers and projects and nonprofits who can actually access those and plan to access those. So when we look at everything that we've been doing, what I like about this budget, and maybe you can expand on it, is in my riding we have a food bank called Friends in Need Food Bank, and I volunteered there a few times, and when I go there, it's heartbreaking to see young families with kids standing in line at the food bank trying to feed their kids. and it's a challenge, and they raise a lot of money on their own. They do a lot of volunteer work to make sure that the programs work for them. But then we hear across the country, many young people across our country in a position where their kids go to school hungry. In fact, we heard recently about the Ontario government dialing back on school breakfast programs. I struggle with this because if we want our kids to succeed, we need to be able to take care of them. And so moving forward, how are the initiatives in Budget 2019, such as the National School Food Program and the Local Food Infrastructure Fund, going to help support students and food banks in communities such as my own of Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question, and I think you identify the challenge we all face in trying to make sure that everyone has equal opportunity. If children don't have enough access to food, clearly being successful in school is a pretty, virtually insurmountable challenge. So we saw that the most important way we could start by getting at this was starting as we did in Budget 2016, with ensuring that families, as they're raising their children in a very expensive time in their life, have more money to raise their children, and that's going to make an enormous difference. So just to put numbers on it, the typical family of four in 2019 at a median income will be about $2,000 better off than they would have been in 2015. That's including everything. That's including all of the measures we took. So that's really important. But we also realize that we need to do more. So it's so the idea around thinking about a food program for children is taking a federal leadership role in a place where all the provinces may not be yet there. So that's what we're trying to achieve by coming to some sort of national standard. And, we see that as critically important as people are going through their years. We're not responsible for the education system. That's a provincial responsibility. But we can certainly help people to be successful as they're going through education. And you've seen that in other measures in our budget as well, because we've not only thought about families being successful, kids being successful in school, but we've thought about how we ensure that they continue to be successful afterwards. So it's putting in place, like we've done, the ability for students as they get past primary and secondary school to have the ability to have work integrated learning, so that they can get the kind of skills they need to be successful in work afterwards. This budget made a really important commitment to ensuring that we'll have 150,000 spaces for sort of co-ops or work integrated learning over the next few years, working together with business and government, so that pretty well every single student that wants to have a work integrated learning position after school will be able to have one. So we're trying to make sure we think about the families, we think about the kids as they're in their early years, and then create opportunities later on in a way that's not all going to be federal, because in the case of, in particular, as I said, the work integrated learning, much of it's coming through business commitments, and we see that as important because we're all facing up to this challenge together.
Thank you both. Mr. Richards.
Okay, so you've been asked a number of times today about the TMX pipeline, and you keep saying that you want to be clear, but I don't think you unfortunately, I don't think you could have been more unclear. Can you give a commitment today that there will be a decision about that pipeline and whether it's going to proceed before the next election, yes or no?
I actually think it's really clear what I've said. So we got a court decision on the pipeline, and that court decision said that
I've heard all of this before, Minister, and I apologize for interrupting you, but you keep on repeating this whole thing about waiting for a decision about this and that. What people want to know, what all the thousands of Albertans that are out of work and awaiting the chance to have an opportunity for their future, they want to know if your government is going to give them a decision before the next election. Yes or no? I don't want to hear all the rhetoric and all the rest. I just want to hear, will there be a decision before the next election? Yes or no? Can you commit to that today or not?
Mr. Richards, there's rhetoric and repetition on both sides, so the minister is going to have the same opportunity to answer the question with however he wants to answer it in the same time frame as you can ask the question.
Well,
Mr.
it
Minister.
should be a yes or a no, Mr. Chair.
So absolute clarity, we are in the process of engaging and doing that with Indigenous peoples. We have stated publicly, and I'm happy to state here, that we believe that that process will conclude, and we've committed that it will conclude for a cabinet discussion and hopeful decision on June 18th. And that is the time when I would be happy to be talking publicly about what next steps, if any. We recognize that doing this in the right way is the only way to get projects like this done.
So you're saying June 18th, you're going to have this process wrapped up. That gives lots of time before an election. So will there be a decision before the election, yes or no?
Well, I'm happy to repeat what I just said, and that
yeah,
is,
but that's not the question I'm asking you, Mr. Minister. I'm asking you if your government is going to make a decision before the next election, yes or no. You can imagine why a lot of people are suspicious here. Is it a yes or is it a no? Will there be a decision or not?
I don't think there's any need for any concerns around suspicion. We've been responding
Are
to...
you kidding me?
We're
asking you
to...
a simple yes or no question. Will there be a decision or not? And you refuse to answer it. People deserve to know. There's thousands of Albertans that have worked. They deserve to know the answer. Is it yes or is it no?
The minister, you have the floor.
We'll continue with an approach that we believe will get us to the position where we can take a decision on June 18th. And that
thousands of Albertans that are out of work and are hurting right now deserve an answer, and I really hope you're going to give one, Minister. Is it a yes or no? Will we have a decision before the next election, yes or no? That'll give you lots of time. I don't want any more of the rhetoric. I just want a yes or no. Will they have a decision or not?
Point of order.
Point of order, Mr. Fergus.
Mr. Chair, he's obviously the honourable member of Crossway is not allowing the minister an opportunity to respond to the question.
He's not responding.
And he's
yes frankly, or no? That's what we're asking.
In almost any other forum, he'd be considered quite rude.
Mr. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe for context, we see the importance of the Trans Mountain Pipeline and the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion to the oil and gas sector in our country. It's the reason that we moved forward on purchasing that pipeline and that opportunity to expand the pipeline. We obviously are seeking.
So then, why can't you just tell us whether there'll be a decision?
Mr. Richards, allow the minister the time.
If it's so important, then you should be able to tell the answer. Is it yes or no? Will there be a decision?
Let's be civil and allow the minister to answer the question.
He's just trying to kill time and not answer the question.
I would say he added new information from my perspective on that last answer.
Then he should be able to give us the
decision. Mr. Minister, the floor is yours.
We are seeking to make sure that this project is one that can be done in the right way. And the failed record of the previous government in getting resources to international markets must be considered here. The approach that is being advocated implicitly, which is to take a decision absent a process that actually includes the people that want to be involved in that process, has
have
led
indicated
us
that you will have all the information you need by June 18th, which gives you plenty of time before an election to make a decision. And all I'm asking you to do is commit to making that decision prior to that election. There's plenty of time, Minister. Would you make a decision before the election, yes or no?
Minister, you have time for a fairly quick answer here.
And as I've said, we are looking to make sure that we do this in the right way. And the right way means considering the approach that was presented to us by the court, which we are doing, and look forward to the next steps.
Okay, who's starting, Ms. Rudd, and then so you're splitting this round, and then we'll be back to we'll have time for a 5-minute round over here. Tom Piker here. Go ahead, Ms. Rudd.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, I wanted to ask you if you could, and I only have a short period of time, talk about the measures for energy efficiency within the budget. Certainly, it's been identified by experts that energy efficiency is one of the best things that we can do, or one of the best things we can do within the global plan to fight greenhouse gas emissions. And coming from a rural riding again, the energy efficiency around saving money on energy allows people to put more money in their pockets. It also reduces greenhouse gas emissions. And can you talk a little bit about it? In Ontario, of course, it was cancelled by the Ford government, and I'm really happy to see us step forward.
Well, thank you. There's a number of measures. Obviously, putting a price on pollution and giving a rebate back to citizens in Ontario and in 3 other provinces is important. So people will, I think, be very pleased when they get those rebates, which for the overwhelming majority of families, 80% of families plus, as the parliamentary budget officer has reported as well, they'll be getting more back in the rebate than the price on pollution. We also, though, recognize that we want to see the opportunity for energy retrofits, issues that are going to be important for households, for municipalities. And so we put money towards the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Green approach towards funding infrastructure projects. That we think will allow people at the municipal level to retrofit buildings. They'll provide opportunities for green approaches to reconsidering infrastructure. That we see as important. We've also put in place measures so that people can get an advantage if they're buying zero emission vehicles. So people that are out buying all electric cars, there's a couple of them out around Parliament Hill today. Will be something that will help people to get into vehicles that will actually have less of an impact on the environment. We see that as important. And that goes a little further because it also allows firms that are building fleets of cars to have accelerated ability to depreciate those fleets if they are zero emission vehicles. So multiple things to help move the dial. What we're clearly seeing is that Canadians are recognizing that the impacts of climate change are real and enormous. It's obviously in and around this region of Ottawa, I was meeting with the Premier of New Brunswick this morning in New Brunswick or in Quebec. The devastating impacts of climate change are real, and we're trying to take action to make an important long-term difference.
Mr. Sabera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. Minister, yesterday we had the Bank of Canada Governor come to committee, and with that we discussed many things, including some of the information contained in the Monetary Policy Report. And with reference to the recent Ontario budget brought down by the Conservative Party of Ontario, which the Bank of Canada is now forecasting will negatively impact economic growth, not only in Ontario, obviously, throughout Canada by 0.2% in this year and flowing into 2020. And we've seen what the cuts that the Conservatives in Ontario are doing, undertaken to whether it's autism programs, whether it's this morning a $50 million program to help parents with daycare costs, with regards to infrastructure, not moving forward on infrastructure, and with regards to budgeting and how important it is that we reassure our residents, and my residents back home in Vaughan Woodbridge specifically, that we as a government will continue to invest in those services that we provide and those benefits that Canadians work hard day in, day out to ensure a better future for not only my kids, but all kids across Canada.
I think I wasn't here yesterday, obviously, to hear Governor Poulos with his comments. But I think what he was identifying, though, was that when a government cuts back, as we're seeing happen in Ontario, it has a direct impact on the economy, which should not be a surprise to anyone. So if we think to the 2015 election, when the Conservative Party and the New Democratic Party were both arguing for, immediately balancing the budget, what they would have found was that they were taking a lot of money out of the economy that, in our estimation, we should have been putting money into the economy. So no surprise that when you take money out of the economy contracts. We see those cuts in Ontario as cuts that are going to have a real impact on people, obviously. In myriad ways. I mean, obviously, for the students that won't have their student loans, that'll be a big impact for them. For the travelers that won't have the ability to have health care provision when they leave the country, that'll have a real impact on them. Our view is that we need to continue to be fiscally responsible, reducing our deficit and reducing our debt as a function of our economy over time. That's critically important. But we can do that while investing in people. We can do that while making sure that families are successful. We can do that while ensuring that our employment statistics and the real advantage of people being in jobs continues. So that balanced approach, that's our government's approach, and demonstrably it's working. we'll do that while we see places like Ontario make cuts.
We'll have to wrap it there, Mr. Minister. Mr. Polyev, 5 minutes, and we'll have room for a couple of single questions, one from Mr. Dussault and one from this side. Go ahead.
You have accepted timelines for building pipelines, just none of them in Canada. Through the Asian Infrastructure Bank, there are 3 pipeline projects that Canadian tax dollars will fund because of your decisions. Those pipelines happen on a fixed time frame, and yet you won't give us a time frame for when construction will begin on the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Simple question. On what date will construction begin for the Trans Mountain Pipeline? The date.
So the reason that the previous Conservative government failed to get any of our oil resources to international markets through
False.
pipelines
I'm just looking for the date, Minister.
is because the idea behind a simple approach just didn't work.
Date.
So our approach instead is to take the
date?
appropriate approach based on what the federal court has asked
the
us
date?
to do. And we're working on that right now.
The date?
And that will come to conclusion on June 18th
When will
the
the
Cabinet
construction begin?
considers our next steps.
The date?
Minister, time to answer in the equal amount of time that you asked. the
Doesn't
question.
matter how
That's
much
the way it's
time he
gonna
has, he doesn't answer any questions anyway. So I'll move on to another one. The finance minister introduced budget legislation which was widely reported to give $250 million to the Asian Infrastructure Bank. But on closer examination, we see that that same legislation is authorizes him, in fact, to double the amount to $500 million. So we've been talking about the $250 million taxpayer contribution you're giving the Asian Infrastructure Bank. Your bill allows you to double that amount. Can you confirm that you will never use that authorization and that Canadians will not be forced to contribute 1 penny more than the $250 million you have so far admitted?
I'm happy to talk about our continuing commitment to being part of the global community and ensuring that the global economy does well, that we not only through our aid budget, but through important investments in development banks, that we make a difference around the world. We've made a commitment to multiple development banks around the world. The International Monetary Fund is an example of an organization we've made a commitment to. The World Bank.
So I'm not asking about any of those things. I'm asking about the Asian Infrastructure Bank. You didn't answer the question. So will you tell us this? What is the maximum amount of money that Canadians will be forced to pay under your plan to the Asian Infrastructure Bank? Just the amount.
Point of order.
Point of order, Mr. Fergus.
I'm just trying to understand the rules here. Is the minister allowed to answer the response in
Yes,
equal amount of time
yes,
to
he
the
is,
question
and it'd
that
be
is
nice if
posed?
he was allowed to answer
So-
the rules with the questions without interruption. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I was saying, we have and will continue to work together with like-minded countries around the world. I've mentioned some of the countries like the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Australia, New Zealand, to invest in development banks that can help to ensure that not only the most challenged countries in the world are more successfal, but also that the global economy does better. And
What's the maximum amount of money that Canadians will have to pay to the Asian Infrastructure Bank?
Am I able to continue with my
You
question,
can
Mr.
continue
Chair?
your answer.
So we see this as important. We think that the ability for Canada to be a responsible member of the international community and to help in all regions of the world.
Asked a
is critically
5-second
important.
question that you're supposed to answer in the same amount of time as the question was asked in. So again,
Mr.
what
Polyev,
is-
Mr. Minister, the
what
floor
is-
is yours, and you'll have time for one last question, Mr. Polyev. Mr. Minister, the floor is yours. Finish your answer, and we'll go to one last question from Mr. Polyev.
We, as I was completing my answer, we do see it as important for us to be part of that international community that's improving our global economy. It has been very successful over the last generation, as we've seen literally billions of people around the world being raised out of poverty. Something that's obviously helped those people, but also helped industrialized countries like Canada to be successful as well. So we will maintain that even in the face of uneducated criticism on that approach.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Minister. Mr. Polyev, last question.
That is the kind of elitism we have come to expect from you, Minister. You think that Canadians who are worried about the protection of their tax dollars are just uneducated, that maybe they didn't inherit mass family fortunes allowing them to go to fancy schools. I'm going to ask you again.
We're not going to get into
I'm going to ask you again,
here.
and you're going to get one last chance to answer this question. You're going to get one last chance to answer this question. What is the maximum amount of money Canadians will have to pay?
Pierre,
Look, I appreciate you're trying to protect the minister here, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you're trying to protect the minister here, but I was in the middle of asking my question.
There is a point of order from this side.
It is out of line for you to interrupt that.
There is a point of order from this side.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see some irony in the comment that Mr. Polyev just made about that's interruption, because I think that's what we've been seeing. And frankly, I would hope that this committee could operate in a respectful way when we have folks come before us. Thank you.
Mr. Polyev, finish your question.
What is the exact maximum amount of money Canadians will be forced to give the Asian Infrastructure Bank? The amount.
Mr. Minister.
Again, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. We've made a commitment to the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. That was done in, I believe, in budget 2018. Budget 2018. And,
just the amount.
No. Mr. Polyev, the minister has the floor.
And we continue to believe that was an appropriate investment made with other like-minded countries to help less developed countries in the Asian region to be more successful.
Okay, Mr. Dussault, I committed to give you one last quick question.
Oui, ça va être bref. C'est pour avoir l'opinion de le ministre.
Yes, I'll be quick. I'd like the Minister of Finance's opinion regarding the fact that last year there were $353 billion that went to 12 of the world's biggest tax havens. That's $353 billion worth of investments by Canadians in the world's 12 biggest tax havens. Now, the budget is more or less to the tune of $353 billion. So how would you react to this, the fact that in 2018 Canadians invested 253 billion Canadian dollars in 12 tax havens? What do you think of that? Response. I don't know if the statistics are reliable. Well, in fact, the statistics come from Statistics Canada, Minister. Well, I'll defer to Andrew and take that into deliberations. But we have gone to great lengths to ensure that our system will protect our economy with anti-money laundering provisions so that our economy is not slowed down. We've taken a number of steps to enhance the system over recent years, and beneficial ownership was a substantial measure that we put in place to ensure that our economy is protected. Now, what about the figures, sir, in your opinion?
With the actual numbers that you're quoting, but so I can't really comment on them. So
Les investissements
we'll have to leave it there to wrap it up. Mr. Fergus, final question. We're all in, all done.
Mr. Minister, given your reception here, I find it amazing that you always say yes when we invite you to come to the committee. Can you tell us how many times you've come to this committee, and how does this compare to perhaps other previous ministers of finance?
Well, I've over my 3.5 years, this is my 16th visit to a parliamentary committee. And I guess in contrast to the previous government over 10 years, the finance ministers attended committee 20 times. So my record is this is about 4 times per year as compared to the previous government, which was about 2 times per year, which is consistent with our approach to making sure that we make ourselves available to the committee and to Canadians. We think that's important. It's a way for us to talk about the important things that we're trying to achieve and answer important questions that help people to understand how the government is working on their behalf.
Okay, with that, thank you, Minister, and your officials for coming. Sometimes we had an exciting time, and sometimes not so much. But that's what happens around Parliament. So again, thank you very much for your willingness to come. With that, we will suspend for a minute, and we'll turn to officials to start Part 4, Division 1. Officials who have been here before for Part 4, Division 1, you're welcome to the table. Thank you, Minister.
Are you suspending? Or?
Yeah, we'll suspend. reconvene, and we're dealing with officials on Part 4, Division 1, Subsection A and Subsection B. I guess we'll start with Subsection A on the Bank of Canada. And I'm not sure, is anybody making a presentation to start? Who is up? Margaret, you're up.
I am, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And introduce yourself too,
Sure.
could you please?
My name is Margaret Tepchinska. I'm Director of Strategic Initiatives at the Department of Finance. With me is Director General Eleanor Ryan, Director General of the Financial Institutions Divisions, and Mary O'Connor, Special Advisor. Part 4, Division 1, Subdivision A, proposes 3 technical amendments to the Bank Act in support of the Budget 2019 announcement that legislative amendments would be proposed to modernize corporate governance for federally regulated financial institutions. The first amendment relates to federal credit unions. Budget 2019 announced that legislative amendments would be proposed to provide members of federal credit unions with more options for voting prior to and at annual general meetings, as well as improved means for participation in the voting process at the annual meetings. Provincial law gives provincial credit union members a wide variety of voting options. Provincial credit unions that have transitioned to the federal charter have asked for similar variety under the federal framework. The proposed amendment will make it easier for members of federal credit unions to exercise their right to vote by adding more options by phone, electronically, or in person at a branch prior to the annual general meeting, in addition to the current way of voting at the meeting and by mail. This amendment was identified by federal credit unions as a means of enhancing their members' participation in the decision-making of federal credit unions. The next set of amendments relates to the proxy regime under the Bank Act. They clarify the authorities for the form of proxy regulations and update existing language related to the solicitation of proxies to make it consistent with the Canada Business Corporations Act and in line with drafting conventions. The objective of the proxy-related provisions in the legislation is to ensure that companies provide shareholders with adequate information about their company so that shareholders can exercise their voting rights in an informed manner. To do so, the regulations set out the form of proxy, the proxy circular, and the powers granted in the form to enable a shareholder to appoint a proxy holder to act on their behalf and receive the necessary information. The Standing Joint Committee for the Scrutiny of Regulations has highlighted the need to update existing out-of-date references in the form of proxy regulations. In response, and as a first step, a legislative amendment in the Bank Act is being proposed to broaden the authority for regulations that set out the proxy framework. Provisions that define solicitation and the rules surrounding the soliciting a shareholder's proxy will be amended as well to clarify language and make bijural updates. These changes are consistent with the Canada Business Corporations Act's definition of solicitation and the Modern Drafting Convention. The department conducted broad consultations in the context of the 2019 Financial Sector Legislative Review, as well as targeted consultations with industry on these amendments. The Canadian Credit Union Association and the federal credit unions requested that the Bank Act be amended to permit federal credit union members more voting options. The department has also had an ongoing dialogue with the Standing Joint Committee for the Scrutiny of Regulations in regards to updating the proxy framework for banks and bank holding companies. And in February 2019, departmental officials appeared before the committee to present a planned approach to update the Bank Act and then the form of proxy regulations. The committee was supportive of the proposed approach and requested a timely implementation. This concludes my overview of the provisions, and we are able to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Is there any questions on the amendments to the Bank of Canada Act? Mr. Dussault first.
Merci. Pour ce qui est des
Thank you. As far as credit co-ops are concerned, this is a new way of proceeding when it comes to voting at AGMs. Is this a practice that's already in place in the private sector that is trying to be emulated? Is that the case? Is that a new way of doing things in other spheres?
Ms. Ryan? Or whoever.
Okay, I'll respond first, and then maybe Ms. Ryan will follow. This is actually a practice that is currently used by the provincial credit unions, so indeed in the private sector, and we are just trying to augment the choices that are available, the set of choices that are available.
Ms. Ryan, you have anything else to add?
Well, perhaps just one clarifying point, which is, as you may know, for the most part, credit unions are incorporated under provincial jurisdiction. The provincial credit unions do have an option, if they want, to expand business beyond their provincial borders to opt to become a federal credit union. Two of them have, and those credit unions, federal credit unions now, have sought out this additional voting option they previously had when they were provincially incorporated and regulated. So all we're doing is creating the same flexibility for them under the federal framework that they have under the provincial framework.
OK.
Mr. You still got more?
Je voulais juste aussi les remercier.
I'd just like to thank, as Deputy Chair of the Regulatory Review Committee, I'd like to thank you for the work that's moving in the right direction. Thank you.
I have Mr. Sabera. I do see the bells are ringing. Are we agreeable to go another 20 minutes? No. No? No. Okay. Then we need unanimous consent to continue after the bells start to ring. So we will have to. How many votes is there? Does anybody know? So we won't be back before 6:30. So we will, at that case, then adjourn, and we'll have to come back on what day? On tomorrow at 11. So I guess we will see you tomorrow at 11. Meeting adjourned.